فلذلك فادع واستقم كما أمرت ولا تتبع أهواءهم وقل آمنت بما أنزل الله من كتاب.
Alhamdulillah wa sallallahu wa sallam ala nabiyyina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. And so the last class that we left off in Abu Shujaa is we talked about the different types of ghusl that we have. And so of the different types, we have the sunnah ghusls, and we talked about the times for those. And so the next thing we're going to start up today is we're going to talk about another thing in the book of purity, which is wiping over the khuffain. And I say khuffain here, and I don't necessarily say, some people will say leather socks or something of this sort, because the word khuff in and of itself, it has its own meaning, apart from the meaning that has been given to it in the modern day age. So if we were to say moccasin, this is a better word than saying necessarily leather sock, because a moccasin is something that someone would walk on normally. It's something it's like a leather shoe that they can wear and that they can walk upon for to do their normal day-to-day business. And so this is something that the Arabs, they would used to wear, these leather moccasins, and they fit the whole foot, and normally they would be above the ankle. And so this is something that the Prophet ﷺ, it's narrated that he went to use the restroom, and after he was done with that, one of the Sahabis that was with him, he went to take off his khuff for him so that he could make wudu. And the Prophet ﷺ said, da'huma, to leave them both, leave my 2 feet. فَإِنِّي أَدْخَلْتُهُمَا الطَّاهِرَتَيْنِ. So because I have put them on when they were both in a state of tahara. And so this is one of the many hadiths that come with this meaning. And of course this is something that this is a mutawatir this is a mutawatir masala, which that this idea of that someone can wipe over the khuff, then this is something that they're allowed to do, and this has been narrated by over 70 sahaba that are different hadiths. So we know that without a doubt the Prophet ﷺ, he used to do this. And of course there's some deviated groups that said that you can't do this, and this is something that's not permissible. And this is why sometimes it will come up inside of books of Aqidah. You'll see that they talk about in Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, they believe in wiping over the khuff. And so this is something you'll see that, because some of the groups, they denied the hadith that came in this, but yet this is something that actually made its way into Aqidah just because of it became a sign of someone who walked away from the Sunnah. And so normally this idea of wiping over the khuff is something that is a relaxation in the Sharia. Normally we have to wash our feet, and instead of washing our feet, then we can wipe over the khuff if certain conditions are met. And so this is where the author here will start up, and he says here faslun, which is chapter, and he says wal mashu ala al khuffaini jaizun bi thalathati shurut. And so he says then wiping over the khuff is permissible with 3 conditions. And then he says here, the first of them is أن يبتدئ لبسهما بعد كمال الطهارة. And so the first one is that putting them on while being in a state of complete purity, or a complete state of purity. So he needs to make sure that he has made wudu. And what he says here by complete state of purity means that his feet were washed. So, and this is, he says this because if someone were to wipe over their socks, or I'm going to say leather socks here, but if someone were to wipe over their khuffs, and they were to then after that take off their khuff, and then they were to make wudu again, they would need to have, or if they wiped over their khuff one time and then they took off their khuff, then they're not in a complete state of purity, as in that they need to wash their foot before they put a khuff on again. Because if they wiped over the khuff and then they took it off, then when they wear it again, they need to make sure that they and they have washed their foot when they were making the last wudu that they made. I hope that's clear. And so this is the first of the three conditions. And the second condition that he gives here is وأن يكون ساترين لمحل غسل الفرد من القدمين. And so that they are covering the place that is that must be washed on the feet. And so this is important because this is the thing that is the replacement. So like the khuff is a replacement for washing the feet, so it needs to cover the same place that the feet would be washed. And of course, Allah tells us to wash our feet up to the up and including the ankles. And so if this is what needs to be washed when we're washing our feet, then if it comes to wiping the feet, then it also needs to be the thing that we're wearing needs to cover that. And so then the next thing that he says here, in the third condition, is وَأَن يَكُونَ مِمَّا يُمْكِنُ تَتَابُعُ الْمَشْيِ عَلَيْهِمَا. And so he says, and then it is made of a material that can be walked on consistently. So it needs to be a strong material, this is why I said khuff, and I didn't necessarily say sak here, as many times it will come in. And this is the view of the Shafi'i madhab, where this ruling, it only goes to what was mentioned in the Sharia. So this is a normal, or like this is a general concept which goes in the Sharia. If there's ever a rukhsa, which a rukhsa is something that is it's a ruling that's a easier thing that's available for somebody, like an easier option that's available for somebody. And if there's ever like a rukhsa available, then we only do what is narrated in that rukhsa. We don't try to go to any extra lengths other than what was narrated in that. So yes, there is there is a way that he says here, and that's made of a material that can be walked on consistently. Yes, it's narrated that the Prophet ﷺ, he did this with khuff, and the khuff is made of leather. But if we were to go in to say that it could be made of another material, it needs to take the same type of qualities that the leather has. And this is the view of the Shafi'i madhab. And so if we had, there's a sock out there that one of the brothers that's one of the teachers of the Shafi'i madhab, he showed me the sock that is able for someone to run in it. Like they can run in the sock itself, and they could pour water on it. It's waterproof, and it grips like the foot, and they could run like a kilometer in it or miles in it, and it's something that's very, very strong. Like this is something that could totally takes this condition. Like all of these conditions would be made for it, because this is something they can walk in, they can run in, they can use it, and it covers the place that needs to be there, and this is something that works. But if we were to say that we have like a thin sock, a thin sock that, one, if it doesn't cover all of the skin, so if it's like so thin that you can actually see the skin under it, then this is something that like you can't use this as one of these things, because it doesn't actually cover the place that must be washed on the feet. It doesn't cover that. Or if it's a sock that has like holes in it, such as like someone's been wearing it for a long time and there's like a hole at the bottom, like in the heel, like that, which is something that you can see, and it's like a big hole and whatnot. This is something that wouldn't be able to be wiped over because it doesn't cover the area. But if it is something that is like a thick sock, say maybe it's like a knit sock for like a winter sock or something, this is something where it gets closer to what would be allowed. But the thing is, if you were to walk in this sock to do your daily business outside, like walking around, like walking to the like whether the corner store or something and walking back, or doing your daily business, this is something, of course, it would get ripped up within a day. It wouldn't hold that. And so this is something that the Shafi'i madhab, they say you need to have some material that is strong enough to hold that. So for an example that would work, that is very applicable for people, is like if someone were to wear like a military boot. Now you have a military boot. The military boot, it covers all the way up to the ankle, and all of this is there's nothing showing. And if you were to wear this military boot while you were in a state of complete purity, then you could wipe over the military boot and there's no problem with that. But if you were to wear like a sock that is, especially if it's thin, because most of the scholars don't allow like thin socks. If it's like a thin sock where, especially if you can see the skin, but if you can't see the skin but it's still thin and you could feel the water, then this is something that goes closer to like this is something a lot of the scholars say is not permissible. And according to like the four madhabs, most of them, they don't allow like even like the thicker socks. They would say that this is not something that's permissible. But there have been some scholars like in the modern day that have seen like the hardship that it could take for someone to take off their sock and whatnot, and so they have said that it's permissible for someone to wear like a sock as long as it covers the area and it's not something you can see the skin through. And this is something some of the scholars have given, like they've said that this is like the fatwa that they've given, but this is something that according to like the Shafi'i madhab is not it's not permissible. And also one of the scholars of the Shafi'i madhab, he was sitting with scholars from every other madhab with him, from the other three madhabs, and he pulled up a thick sock and he showed it to all of them, and he said, do any of you guys in your madhab, do you think that this is something that is permissible for you to wipe over? And all of them said no. They're like, no, this is not. It's not permissible. So this is an area of like there's definitely a debate in it. And the general concept is with any rukhsa or anything that is like a relaxation in the deen, that you don't go to any you only stick with what is narrated. You don't go anywhere else. And yes, it is narrated that some of the Sahaba, they wiped over their jawrab, which jawrab is like nowadays we would consider a sock, we would call it a jawrab, but at that time it was something that was much thicker and then what we would consider like socks now. If you were to get like a sock from like a pack of Adidas or something, this is something that's totally different from what is considered that in this day and age. And this is also an important concept to remember. Whenever there's a name that's given in the Sharia that is at a certain time and place, it's known as a certain thing. If we come later in the later times, and we have something that is similar to that, and then we call it with that name, that doesn't mean that this is the same thing. Like, so we say that this is jawrab, and if I were to pull up like a sock this day and age, we would say this is jawrab, but this is not the sock that they were wearing back then. These are two different things, and they have two different like attributes. So we can't necessarily say just because we called something this that it takes that ruling. And something similar to this concept is that the Prophet ﷺ, he talked about the most punished people on the Day of Judgment will be the musawwirin, and they will be like, these are the people that he says musawwir. And musawwir is like taswir, and taswir at that time it was meant as someone who either they carved images or they drew images of and this was understood in other hadiths as something that's a living being. But these are the people that will be the most they will be have the most severe punishment on the Day of Judgment. So this word musawwir or taswir, this is something that nowadays, when we had the invention of cameras and whatnot, the Arabs of that time, they called this camera they would call it, or like photography, they would call it taswir, and the person who does it, they would call him a musawwir. And so if we were to take this name and put it back to the hadith, that is that the most punished people on the Day of Judgment will be the musawwirin, then you would say that a photographer falls into this hadith because he has the name of a taswir. And this is something that there's a flaw in saying that this person is a musawwir, because the time that this was narrated, this does not mean photography. This means something that is someone who is actually carving images or is writing images with their hands. So this is sometimes there's a bit of flaws where people will take a terminology that is used in this day and age, and they'll apply that terminology to the Sharia. And the Sharia came in a certain context, and so it needs to be understood in the context that it came, not in the context that we bring to it. And if someone were to use this, then it needs to be in from the using qiyas, but it can't be from the word itself. And so this is the same thing like with Khuff, or like with jawrab is the word that we're talking about here. Yes, the Sahaba, they used to use jawrab, and they would wipe over that, but that jawrab then is not the jawrab now. And also the Khuff then is not necessarily what we if you were to go to a Islamic store and you were to buy a Khuff, like even this, if you were to walk in it, only that, around and do your daily business and whatnot for like a day or two, it would be totally ripped up and destroyed. And this is something that that wouldn't necessarily be considered a khuff back in the day, but nowadays we would call it a khuff. And yes, some of the scholars have differed in this regard and whatnot. And inshallah, tomorrow in our Aqidah class, we'll talk about like when differences of opinion come, how do we deal with the difference of opinion? And since this is an area of ijtihad, like where it takes like looking at the text and whatnot, this is something that you don't go hard on anybody who has one view, or you don't go hard on someone who takes the other view. This is something that it's definitely an area of ijtihad. Or like where someone has to do work to understand what this applies to and what it doesn't apply to. And so this is something that we can accept the difference. It's like an acceptable difference of opinion here. And so, but the view of the Shafi'i method, like most every single sock would never be there unless it's like that one all-purpose terrain sock that you can run in, and that's waterproof. And also, like the Shafi'i view is that it also needs to be, if you are wiping on it, you can't like have the water pour down onto your feet right away. It needs to be something that separates the water from getting down through like whatever the material is. So of course, if someone is wearing boots, this is something they can totally use. This is something that is totally fine. But if they are wearing socks, then they should keep in mind that there is a difference of opinion. And the very least is that they should make sure that the socks doesn't have any holes in it, because this is something the vast majority of the ulama of all of the different madahib, they don't like allow this. And if it is something that is very thin, where especially if you can see the skin, then this is something that the vast majority don't allow this. And especially like there's some of these socks that are like the dress socks. These are some things no one should be wiping over the dress socks. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. So the next thing that we'll talk about here, and so this is wiping over the khuff. We talked about the conditions, the three conditions of wiping over it is one, that the person needs to be in a state of complete purity, which means they wash their feet in the last wudu before they put it on. And then covering the place that must be washed on the feet, so that means that there's no like holes or slits in it or anything that's opening showing the feet. If someone's wearing like a rubber boot, like one of those rubber boots, and they can see their feet from the top, that's no problem. They can still wipe on it. The thing needs to not be seen from around it, like from looking from the sides. And the third one is that it is made of a material that can be walked on consistently, and we talked about that. And so then the next thing that he goes into, he talks about the timing for wiping on the khuff, because this is also another important aspect of it. And so he says here, وَيَمْسَحُ الْمُقِيمُ يَوْمًا وَلَيْلَةً وَالْمُسَافِرُ ثَلَاثَةَ أَيَّامٍ بِلَيَالِيهِنَّ وَابْتِدَاءُ الْمُدَّةِ مِنْ حِينِ يُحْدِثُ بَعْدَ لُبْسِ الْخُفَّيْنِ. All right. And so he says the resident or the muqim, and we'll talk about this, can wipe over it one day and one night, which is 24 hours. So if he started at 6 p.m., then at 6 p.m. the next day, then it ends. And so it's 24 hours exactly. If he starts at 6:20, and then it ends at 6:20 the next day. And this is how it's exact. And so then the thing for the traveler, the musafir, he gets 3 days and 3 nights, and so that's the 72 hours exact. This is something that is exact. And the evidence for this is that Shurayh ibn Hani, he went to Aisha and asked her about wiping on the khuffain. And she said, go to Ali, because he's with the Prophet ﷺ when he goes on his expeditions or his traveling. So he went to Ali and asked him, and he said the Prophet ﷺ that he made it thalath 3 days and three with its 3 nights. So like the 3 days and 3 nights for the musafir, which is the person who's on a journey, the traveler, and yawman wa layla lil muqim, and 1 day and 1 night for the person who is resident. And so there's these two terms. One is muqim, and the other is musafir. And the reason I use the Arabic term is because someone who's studying, they'll see these words have a certain meaning, and they'll come back up. And when we talk about salah, for the person who can shorten their prayer and can length and also join their prayers. And so the muqim is somebody who is they're a resident, which means they're staying in the place that they're staying. So like if I'm in a certain town, like if I arrived in Cairo, then I plan on being here for more than like say I'm planning on being here for a week before traveling or something. So if I arrive here and I'm gonna be here for more than 4 days, and then not counting the first day and the last day, like the first day of entering and the day that I'm exiting, if I'm going to be here for 4 days, then I'm a muqim. But if I'm going to be here for less than that, or in this place, or if I'm still moving, then in this case I would be considered a musafir. And of course, like the traveler, the traveling needs to be a certain distance, and this is something that the traveling that is mentioned in the hadith when the Prophet ﷺ was traveling was that he would travel from like Mecca to Medina, and this is like a certain area, and like so the smallest amount that we have to go off of is like around 55 miles or so. And so someone who is traveling for more than 55 miles, then they have this application of a traveler, and this is one way. This is not both ways. So if I'm going somewhere that's 25 miles and I'm going back, this is 25 miles only. We don't say that this is 50 miles or something of that sort. But we consider the distance too only, not the round trip. And so the person who is a muqim, he gets 1 day and 1 night. And so this is anyone who is staying in residence for more than 4 days. Or like we can say that in one place. So if I'm visiting someone and I'm planning on staying there for I have like my ticket set up and I'm going to stay there for a week. So this week, as soon as I land, I'm a muqim. But if I were to go there and I'm only staying there for 3 days, even if I'm like, even if I stay in a hotel and I don't even leave the hotel or something, I still have the term of a musafir, which is like a traveler, because I am still in the middle of the journey. And this is the view of the Shafi'i madhab, and of course the other madhabs, they have their own views in that. But this is the view that we'll go off of for now. And so the next thing that he said was, and the time for wiping starts from the time of losing the state of purity after having putting on the khuffs. And so this is one of the views that is in the madhab. And this means, so whenever the person he say I made wudu, and I prayed Fajr. Okay, so I prayed Fajr and I made wudu before that. Then I put on my khuffs. And so I prayed Fajr, and then sometime after that, I took a nap. And so then when I took a nap, I slept, I lost my wudu. So when I wake up from that nap, my time from that would start. Because this is the time that the hadith ended. And so losing the state of purity happened, so I wake up at, say I took a nap before dhuhr, so I wake up at 11:30 or something. And so 11:30 would be the time that it starts. So the next day I can wipe all the way until 11:30, and then after this time I no longer have this rukhsa. And so this is the view that he gives here. And this doesn't, I even if I didn't wipe over it yet, like I wore them and I didn't wipe over them yet, this is the time that I would start with. One of the views that Imam An-Nawawi he talks about, and he actually says this is like the view that the evidence points most strongly towards, is that the time that it starts from is from the first time that someone wipes. So whenever you wipe, the first wipe, that's when your that's when the day starts from. And this is what he gives. And of course, it's for the person looking at like the wording of the hadith, that the person who is wiping, he has 1 day. So it's connected to the wiping is where the connection goes to, not necessarily to the hadith, or like when the person loses their state of purity. So this is what the author here, he mentions that it starts from losing the state of purity. So as soon as someone loses their state of purity, this is what he says your time would start. And then when it ends, then at this point in time, when the period when that time period ends, then the person would need to wash their feet again. And this is something that when they make the wudu again, they would need to take off their socks, and they would need to or take off their shoes and whatnot, and wash their feet completely for their wudu to be complete. And so the next thing that he says here, and which is the last point that we'll go over, is he says, فَإِن مَسْحَ فِي الْحَضْرِ ثُمَّ سَافَرَ أو مسح في السفر ثم أقام أتم مسح المقيم. So he says, and if they wipe as a resident and then travel, or wipe as a traveler then become a resident, then they only wipe for the time of a resident. And so this is looking at like the general concept. If somebody is no longer if someone wiped as a resident, then they only get that time. So they wiped as a resident, they have 24 hours. If they travel after that, they don't get any more than 24 hours because they started that 24 hours. And if they were to wipe as a traveler, and then they become a resident, they don't get the 3 days that they don't finish out their 3 days because they were that. No, now they're a resident, so they only get the 24 hours. If they've already completed their 24 hours, then they have to wash their feet the next time. Or if they haven't completed their 24 hours, then they finish out their 24 hours. But they don't get like the greater of them. They get the lesser of them. So if you have the two options, they'd always get the lesser. Wallahu ta'ala. And so then the next thing that he talks about is the wiping is invalidated by three things. And so he says, وَيُبْطِلُ الْمَسْحُ بِثَلَاثَةِ أَشْيَاء بِخَلْعِهِمَا وَانْقِضَاءِ الْمُدَّةِ وَمَا يُوجِبُ الْغُسْلِ. So he says here, and the wiping is invalidated by three things. One, taking them off. And so if someone takes it off, then he no longer gets this rukhsa. So the rukhsa is gone away, so he has to wipe it, even if he only took off one. So he only took off one, or if he had an itch or something, he took it off to scratch his feet, and he needs to wash the next time. He can't wipe after this. And so if any part of like the skin that is supposed to be washed gets exposed, then he needs to wash his feet the next time. And the second one, which is the time period ending, is so when the time period ends, then of course he needs to wash his feet, and the wiping is no longer valid, or he can't do wiping anymore after that. And then the third thing is whatever obligates the ghusl. And so this is something that if he became junub, say he went to sleep and he woke up and he needs to now take a shower and whatnot, a ghusl, because say he had a wet dream or something. So then at this point he can't keep his shoes on. He needs to wash all of his body. And so that's something that is much greater than wearing the shoes and whatnot. And this comes from a hadith that the Prophet ﷺ, he used to like tell the people who were with him on his expeditions, or like that they would wipe on their khuffs, and not take them off for 3 days from making wudu, from going to the bathroom, whether it's number one or number two, or from sleeping, or except for janaba. For janaba, they would need to take them off, and so then they would take them off, and they wouldn't wipe over that for janaba, which is like that major state of impurity. And so inshallah, these are the main things here. And so is there any questions over what we went over? Anything that's unclear?
I heard that I had an issue where I had bad acne, and it's okay to do it if getting your sock wet, do it over your shoes, and getting your sock wet might make it worse. Is there one of those things that's kind of just best judgment, is your advice, or a consensus?
There's as far as like a consensus, there's not like a consensus in this, but if you were to wipe over your shoe and some bit of water made it down to like the sock, then this is something, assuming that the sock is something you can wipe over, then this would be good, it's enough.
Okay.
And like the wiping, also like to talk about the wiping, how much of the wiping needs to be done. Like the sunnah is to wipe the top of it. It's not to wipe the whole thing. but the sunnah is to wipe the top of it. The Shafi'is, they say to wipe the whole thing, and this is something that there's not necessarily any strong dalil for it, except that it's the replacement of that, so they takes the same ruling. But it needs, like, the sunnah is to wipe the top of it, and even if you only wiped it a little bit, that's it would still count, because the smallest amount of something that you've done, as long as it takes the same, it takes the same action, like you would call it wiping, that still counts. Just like we say in the head, that works. And this is the Shafi'i view on that.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, and also just also remember the general principle is always la darar wa la dirar, which is like there's no harming or like making something worse than harm, like going back and forth and harming. So if something's going to be harmful for you, it's best to leave it, or to find whatever's going to be less harmful. Any other questions? Wa alaikum salam.
So, what constitutes as waterproof? How do you understand something without water is not?
If you were to put water, if you were to drop water onto it, does it come down to the bottom right away? Like if I were to drop some water on it, is it going to fall down? Like, a lot of shoes, they're not waterproof. But if you were to have water that hits on it, you're not going to feel it. So,
Okay. So if it goes around, it's
yeah. Yeah. And like if you're dropping a whole bucket of water, yeah, maybe it'll feel wet. But if you have something that when water hits it, you don't necessarily feel it. Some of the like thick socks, if you were to put water onto it or wipe it, you wouldn't feel the wetness. And this is, yeah.
how many pockets do you say? I've actually never thought about pockets now. They're somewhat waterproof, right?
Yeah. And if they're leather, yeah, then this is totally great. It's great. It's not the point is not waterproof. The point is that water doesn't reach the skin. Like if you were to have some water fall into it, the water doesn't reach the skin right away. It can't be like that.
Okay.
No. No. All right, and so the next thing that the scholar he went into is the chapter of Tayammum. And so, of course, this is another type of rukhsa, and we'll talk about this. And this is the opposite of using water. So whenever we can't use water, we're not able to use it, whether because we don't have water, or we or we have some type of like sickness or something that would be made worse by using water. Then in this case, we would make sure that we would do something instead of that, which is the tayammum. And tayammum, linguistically, it means like intending, but in this term, of course, it means getting dirt and using dirt to make a form of purity, which is wiping the face and wiping the hands from this. And so the author, he starts off talking about the conditions for tayammum, for when are we able to do that. So he says, فَصْلٌ وَشُرَائِطُ التَّيَمُّمْ خَمْسَةُ أَشْيَاء. And so he says there's 5 conditions here. وُجُوبُ الْعُذْرِ بِسَفْرِ أَوْ مَرَضٍ. And so he says there needs to be an excuse. He says here from traveling or sickness. And traveling, normally it would be when someone is traveling that they don't find water. But if they aren't traveling, and for whatever reason, like there's no water in their place, and they're not a traveler, then they can still make tayammum in this case. And he says here from traveling or sickness. And so of course, like it's you would say like the lack of water is better to say here than traveling. And so then the next thing is that he says here that the time for salah entering. And he says here, وَدُخُولُ وَقْتِ الصَّلَاةِ. And so this is something that you don't make tayammum before the time for the salah comes, because in the ayat that Allah tells us, he connects it with the salah itself. إِذَا كُمْتُم مِنَ الصَّلَاةِ فَاغْسِلُوا وُجُوهَكُمْ. And so so when you have come to salah, then wash your face and wash your hands and all of these things. And then he comes, and if you don't have water, or if وَإِن كُنتُمْ عَلَى سَفَرٍ أو and like if you are sick or on a journey and whatnot, and فَلَمْ تَجِدُوا مَاءً, and then you don't find water, فَتَيَمَّمُوا. And so like this is then make tayammum. So the time for making tayammum only comes after the time for salah, and also if you haven't found water at that time. So of course both of these things need to have happened first before someone can make tayammum. Is that the time for that salah has entered, and the tayammum only works for like the one salah that is obligatory, like fard salah. It only works for one of them. It doesn't work for like multiple. So if I say I take tayammum and then I pray dhuhr with it, and then asr comes and I haven't broke my wudu, or like it's not wudu but it's tayammum. But if I haven't broke it, I can't pray asr with that same one. I need to make tayammum again for the asr prayer. And so it always needs to be made for every single obligatory salat needs to have its own tayammum. And that starts at the beginning of that time. You can make the tayammum at the beginning of that time. If you want to make like other, like if you want to make other prayers, such as like your nawafil, like to pray like the sunnahs before and after, this is fine. Like you can pray as many of these as you want with the one tayammum for the obligatory prayer, or even just like another one tayammum. And so this is something that it has to be inside of that time. And then the third one that he mentions here for the third condition is وَطَلَبُ الْمَاءِ. And so he says here that he needs to have looked for water. So if you haven't looked for water and then you want to make tayammum, then you haven't done what Allah has told you to do before making tayammum. Because Allah says, وَلَمْ تَجِدُوا مَاءً, or فَلَمْ تَجِدُوا مَاءً فَتَيَمَّمُوا. And so like if you haven't found water, then make and you haven't found water, then you make the tayammum. So this is of course for the person who hasn't found water. So if he has water or he hasn't looked for water, then he hasn't done what's upon him first before going for the tayammum. So the person needs to look for water. If they know that they've already looked for water and they know there's no more water, say they're on a journey and they're in the car and they know they only have enough water to drink, then they know that water is only good enough for them to drink, and they don't have any other water with them, and they look around and they're in a desert, there's nothing, all right, then there's nothing that they have to do. Or if they haven't moved from that same place, and the next salat comes, they don't need to go run around looking for more water if they know this is all we have. But if they think that there's water somewhere else, then they need to go look and make sure that is there water there or is there not water. As long as it's not like a super far away, that's not obligatory on them in that case. And so then the next thing he says, which is connected, وَتَعَذُّرِ اسْتِعْمَالِهِ. And so he says that, or the inability to use the water. So as I mentioned, if someone needs water and they only have enough water to drink, or they only have enough water for like something, or like for someone else to drink, whether it's like an animal or something in this case, and they need the water for that purpose, and of course then this is something spare a life rather than make wudu in this case. And so tayammum is something that would be available even though they have water. Yes, they have water, but this water they can't use it because they need to drink to survive, or they think they need it to survive. Maybe they don't know whether or not they will find water for a while, so they want to save this water. Yes, they can make tayammum in that case. And so then the next thing here, which is the inability to use water, and also this comes into someone if they have they have a cut on their head, and there's a hadith that the Prophet ﷺ someone came to him and with news that there was a Sahabi that had that got a very deep wound on his head, and so he was. Then he was praying before, and then one day he woke up and he was junub, and so when he was junub, then he knew that he needed to take a ghusl, then he needed to take a whole make the whole ghusl, but yet he had this open wound, and it's best for it not to get water onto it, of course, because that could be very, very bad. And so he asked the people around him, and they said, "We don't see anything for you except that you need to take ghusl. You need to wash everything. We don't see anything else for you." And so they gave him that fatwa, and without going to the Prophet ﷺ or someone else of knowledge about this issue, but they told him that, and then he went and he made ghusl, and then it got festered and whatnot, and he died from it. He died from making the ghusl. And so the Prophet ﷺ, when he heard this, he was very upset, and he said, "Qataluhu." And so he said that they killed him. They killed him with that. And if they don't know, then they should have asked. They should have asked someone who did know, instead of giving out a fatwa that actually caused this person's death from that. And it would have been enough for him to make wudu, or to make tayammum. And so this is something that, yes, he had a reason why he couldn't make the complete ghusl. So he should have done what he can do. Like if he can make ghusl of some of the things, then he does that. And then if he can't make ghusl here, then he would make tayammum for that lack of what he was missing out in his ghusl. And this is the way that sometimes you'll have, yes, he has water, there's water everywhere, and he's living, but at the same time he can't use it because of some type of cut or wound. And this is the same thing on any of the, like on the body. If there's any type of cut or wound that is going to be delayed in its recovery because of the water reaching it, then the person can make tayammum for that. And so this is something that is made easy, but this is something that a very key concept is that the hardship, or like if there's a hardship, it doesn't drop all of the things that are easy around it. So if you can still make wudu, except that you need to leave a spot. Say you got a gash right here. If you can make wudu, you just wipe around the gash. It doesn't mean that you no longer have to make wudu. You just make tayammum and no more wudu. No, you make wudu, but you don't wipe like that gash or whatever. You leave that and you wipe around it. Whatever you can do, you do what you can do, and then whatever you can't do, then that's the only thing that is like dropped from what you're obliged to do. And so this is the thing that someone would do if they have the inability to use the water. Then they will still make whatever they can, and then anything else that they can't do, they make tayammum for it. And of course, if they have a cut on their arm or whatnot, and they can't make the wudu on their arm, they would make tayammum for that. And then if they also have a cut on their foot, and they can't make wudu for that, and they have both of these cuts at the same time, when they make wudu, they would wipe around it, and they would make tayammum for that. And then when they would need to wash their feet, then they would make another tayammum for each different body part that they weren't able to accomplish. And so this is the view of the Shafi'i madhab, that each one of these they would get their own tayammum for it. And then the next thing of the conditions here, going back to the conditions, and that also he says of the conditions is for the dirt to be pure. Or to be pure dirt. And so he mentions here, and he says وَالتُّرَابُ الطَّاهِرُ لَهُ غُبَارٌ. And then he says that the dirt is pure. And also in the certain like book that I have here, there's an addition that it also needs to have gubar, which is like dust. It needs to have like dust inside of the dirt. That it can't just be like dirt that doesn't have any type of dust or something in it. And this is the view of the Shafi'i madhab. And some of the other madhabs, they say all it needs to be is something that's considered earth. Like whether even some of them say like if it's that if you were to smack like gravel, it would work for you. Or if you were to use like a rock, you would hit that, and they say that would work for you as long as it's considered ard. Like that it's considered something from the earth. But this is something that the Shafi'i understood from Sa'id and Tayyiba, that this is something that needs to be like Tayyiba would come from this. You would understand that this is something that can grow. Like you can grow from it. And then the Prophet ﷺ, when he showed people how to do it, he blew off dust from him. So they would say, okay, there's dust. So it needs to be like that dust, which is something that is usable. And then the next thing he says here is فَإِنْ خَالَطَهُ جِسٌ أَوْ رَمْلٌ لَمْ يُجْزِ. And so he says that if there was anything mixed with the turab, or like the dirt, if there was anything mixed with it, such as like this, like jis is like building material for like how they would make plaster. So if like that plaster dust, if that was mixed with the dirt, then he says that then it wouldn't be good. Or raml, which is another type of this. If this was ever like the gypsum, or raml, which is also like that thing that they would make plaster with, if it's mixed with it, then it wouldn't. Then he would need to find other dirt. And so the reason for that is like because he's wiping and he's supposed to cover his face with this like dust. He's supposed to cover his face with it, and if it's mixed with something else, that something else is going to stop the dust from actually reaching what it's supposed to cover. So it's going to stop something from reaching what it's going to cover. So it wouldn't make it. So it wouldn't be able to work. And this is something that the Shafi'i madhab, they tend to be the strictest when it comes to the dirt itself. This is something that is very strict in the Shafi'i madhab, as opposed to other madhabs, which I mentioned. Anything that's considered like ard, like which is like earth. Anything that's considered earth, whether it's a rock or stone or something of that sort, or like a tree. Like some of the other madhabs, they'll say this is something that's okay. Or if someone's locked up in like a cell, there's nothing except like the walls in the cell. Okay, then they hit the walls in the cell and they make wudu, or they make the tayammum with that. And so the next thing that he talks about are the obligatory actions, like the fard obligatory actions. So he says, وَفَرَائِدُهُ أَرْبَعَةُ أَشْيَاء. And he says there's 4 actions that are obligatory from it, or like the arkan, which are the pillars of it, which is the first is niyyah. And of course, tayammum, it means like intending. Like the word itself means intending, so of course this is something that is a part of it. And so the niyyah, which is the first one. And also he says, and the niyyah itself, this is something to make the salat, it's not like, there's a view that, there's 2 different views, that one is that tayammum, it actually raises the state of impurity. And the other view is that tayammum allows someone to pray while in the state of purity. It doesn't raise the state of impurity, but rather it gives them the ability to pray while it's still in the state of impurity. So like these are these 2 different views. One, it's actually like it makes that person tahir, like it makes them pure. And then the other one is that it gives them the ability to pray while being impure. And so the Shafi'i madhab is of the last opinion, that this is not something that gives this person purity, but rather it's something that allows them to pray in spite of it, and in spite of not having it. So and so when they have the intention, they would have the intention to for that istibaha, which is like that they would be allowed to pray. So this is the intention that they would hold there. And the next thing here, after the intention, is wiping the face. So they would have the intention when they go down and get the dirt, and they would hit the dirt, and then when they come, they'd have the dirt that's on their hand, they would hit the ground, and then they would have, while they do this, and they have the intention while they're putting on their face. And then they wipe their face completely. So of course, like they had glasses, they would need to wipe all of their face. And then after they wipe their face, the next thing that they would have to do is, he says here, wipe their hands up to the elbows. So that they would wipe their hands all the way up to the elbows and come around and make sure that they get all of their hands, their left and the right hand, all the way up to the elbows. And the reason he says up to the elbows is because the hands that are mentioned in the ayah for فَاغْسِلُوا وُجُوهَكُمْ وَأَيْدِيَكُمْ, so that Allah tells us to wash our face and our hands, these are the same hands that they understand this as the same hand that is mentioned later on, which is when we make tayammum. فَتَيَمَّمُوا صَعِيدًا طَيِّبًا فَامْسَحُوا بِوُجُوهِكُمْ وَأَيْدِيكُمْ. So like to wash with your hands. So the hands are the same hands as the ones that were mentioned for tahara previously. And this is something that in a sahih hadith, the Prophet ﷺ was showing some of the sahabis that there was a sahabi that he woke up junub, and he was with another. There was 2 sahabis woke up junub, and they didn't know about do they need to like wash all of their body with dirt like while they're on the journey, do they need to wash all of their body with dirt, like to make tayammum? So they ended up rolling around in the dirt to make sure that they had all of this, because they knew tayammum worked for they knew tayammum worked for like the minor impurity, but they didn't know it worked for the same way it worked for the major purity. So he ended up rolling around, and they mentioned it to the Prophet ﷺ, and he said it would have been enough. It would have been enough for you to do it like this. And then he hit the ground and he blew off the dust, and he wiped his face and he wiped his hands to the cuff. Like he only wiped this in the hadith. So he didn't wipe this, and he said this would have been enough. Like, and so of course, like looking at this hadith, this is something that is very strong proof that only wiping the hands, like the hands that we would say in English, and as opposed to like the yed in Arabic is all the way up to here, but like the hands, which is just up to the wrist and whatnot, this is enough for someone. And this is not the view of the Shafi'i madhab. Rather, this is something that, like looking at the evidence in itself, that it points to. And this is what the majority of the scholars will say when it comes to this issue in opposition to the Shafi'i madhab. But the going up to the elbows is what they say when it comes to this issue. And then the last thing here is going in order. And so this is all of these things need to be done in order. Inshallah, this is the last thing we'll probably stay with today. And going in order is also similar to like when we have tahara and any of the other, like when we have the same thing when going in order for wudu, it needs to be in order. So it's the same thing when it comes to tayammum, because it's also tahara, it needs to go in order as well. If there's any questions about what we went over today, feel free to ask. Sure.
I had a little bit trouble hearing you at the point of pure dirt. So what does not constitute as pure dirt?
Yeah, so if there's something that is najis mixed with it, that's one. Yeah. So like, yeah, if it's something you see like there's najis inside of that dirt, then you need to get something that isn't that. No.
Okay, and then what was the part that you said dirt mixed with dust? What was that part?
There needs to be like it can't be like dirt that doesn't have dust in it. Like if it was like pure clay, for instance, this is something that wouldn't be enough. Or like yeah.
More fine.
It needs to have something of it.
More fine than clay has some dust. I kind of know what you mean.
Yeah. This is something that is the
Shafi'i.
It's a specialty of the Shafi'i thing, so you know.
Okay. Does that go back to that principle that you stated earlier, where relaxations tend to be very specific?
Yeah, they stick to what is. Yeah, that's what it is. It only sticks to what is narrated. And we don't go to any extremes with that.
After Nia, you said wiping the face. So can you just kind of demonstrate the actual action for me again?
The wiping of the face would be when you would hit the ground with your hands, and you would have dirt that comes up on your hands. And if there's a lot of dirt, you could blow it off a little bit. And then you would wipe, just like you would wipe your face for that. You just wipe. And like if the dirt doesn't get under all of the things, that's not super important. The important thing is that it came up on it, because it's just wiping.
Okay, and then you said for Shafi only, it's hands up to elbows.
Yeah, and we'll talk about the other things, but the similar to making wudu, we have the obligatory action of making sure that the dirt reaches everything. So if I'm wearing a ring, then I need to move that ring or take it off so I can make sure that the dirt got into it, got onto the spot that the ring was. Remember, as we talked about making sure water reaches everything, the same thing with the wiping. You need to make sure that the dirt reaches everything. There's nothing stopping it. Sallallahu alaihi ala nabiyyina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.
فلذلك فادع واستقم كما أمرت ولا تتبع أهواءهم وقل آمنت الكتاب وأمرت لأعدل بينكم الله ربنا وربكم لنا أعمالنا ولكم أعمالكم لا حجة بيننا وبينكم الله يجمع بيننا وإليه المصير.